I want to tell you about a place that I kind of grew up in. I spent summers in Traverse City, Michigan, but more specifically a little town that is right next to Traverse City, Michigan called Grawn on Bass Lake. It's my grandparents' cottage on Bass Lake. Several occasions, my cousin Tom and I, sometimes with my sister Robin, sometimes with my cousin Heidi, we were all really close in age. We'd go fishing. Sometimes my dad was along too. We'd always catch, one or two fish. Rock bass, which you didn't eat. Bluegill, which were good. Occasional catfish, or we called them bullhead. Occasional largemouth bass, and usually several perch. Bass Lake didn't have a lot of bass in it, but it had a lot of perch in it. We loved to fish. We never really caught enough to make a meal or anything. We just liked to fish. But then, for real, there was the day of the huge catch. I remember it clearly because it's one of those milestones that sticks with you. We caught more than 100 fish in less than an hour. We were pulling in fish as fast as we could bait the hooks. And we used just fake salmon eggs, those little pink pearl things, and worms. We filled up at least 4 stringers full of fish. And then, after spending hours and hours cleaning the fish, perch are small. You don't really get a perch fillet. It's just really tiny there. After my grandma helped us, my grandma cooked them, we had a wonderful fish dinner at the lake, at the cottage. So when this week's Bible reading comes up, Luke 5, 1-11, the fish story comes back to me. What do you think of when you hear about the time the disciples caught this ginormous amount of fish just by listening to what Jesus said to do? Got another fish story, and it's not this kind of fish story. It's 1984 now. I'm kind of a grown-up, at least I'm in my 20s, 19, 20, and I traveled to a small town in western Missouri for a weekend wedding. And while I was there, I fished for bass at a few area farm ponds. The farmers told us that if you catch anything that's too small, do not put it back in the water. These ponds are just overgrown with fish. In less than 2 hours, we caught more than 80 good-sized bass. And all we used for bait were the local grasshoppers. You'd find a grasshopper, put it on a hook, throw it in the water, pull in a fish. It was just that fast. That night, we had a delicious fish dinner. Big catches. We didn't do anything special to catch the fish. There were just the times when a huge school of fish or a well-stocked pond were right there for us. We caught them with nothing fancy. We used hooks, poles, bobbers. The first time, the perch catch, we didn't even have reels. We just had a line tied to the pole, like a bamboo pole, but it was a regular fishing pole. The second time we had reels so that we could cast out a little bit from the shore. I know others have had big catches with expensive poles, excellent lures. Any fisher people out here? You like to go fishing? And lures like the Shad Rap from the 80s, the Bass Assassin, jug baits, spinner baits. We didn't have anything. We didn't have spoons. We didn't have bucktails. We didn't have flies, anything. We caught our fish with something simple. The big catch of fish from today in the Bible reading didn't include anything seemingly special either. And it was a different kind of fishing. Simon, James, and John cast nets, and they weren't catching anything with their nets. All night long, they hadn't caught anything. Jesus got in their boat, preached for a while, and then he told Simon to go out into the deep water. And Simon was skeptical, but he did it. And they caught more fish than they could handle. Simon's response to what happened was pretty dramatic and reminiscent of Isaiah's response when he was called by God. Isaiah said in Isaiah 6:5, "Woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." And Simon, who was then known as Peter, or became known as Peter later, said, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." It's like reminiscent of Old Testament stuff. And Jesus' response of "do not be afraid," it's also pretty familiar. Jesus said, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you'll be catching people." Not like that, but you'll be catching people. In Genesis 26, it says, "At that very night, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you and will bless you." In 1 Chronicles 28, David said further to his son Solomon, "Be strong and of good courage and act. Do not be afraid." Isaiah 41, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God." Luke 2:10, "But the angel said to them, Do not be afraid, for I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people." John 6:19 and 20, "When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were terrified. But he said to them, It is I, do not be afraid." The phrase "do not be afraid" in some way occurs more than 60 times in the Old and New Testament. God is consistently telling people, do not be afraid. Now, I get it. If something huge happened, like a fiery angel appeared, or Jesus was walking on water, I'd be terrified too. And Jesus was consoling, or the Bible is consoling, saying, do not be afraid. It doesn't mean that there's nothing to be afraid of in the world, but God is consistently reminding us, when things are tough, when things are scary, we don't have to be afraid. But then there's that part right after the do not be afraid. And I alluded to it just a moment ago. He said, from now on, you'll be catching people. I'd like to do that. I have to even out. Actually not taking people from their homes and then having them squirming and dying on the deck of a boat. That's when you catch fish. Jesus isn't about killing people or forcibly relocating them to a place where they'll suffocate. Jesus told the people that they were going to bring the good news to all the people. He told that to the disciples. The good news. Liberation, freedom, reconciliation through God's unconditional and eternal love and grace. And we are called to bring that same good news to all the people. That's a lot. And maybe it seems like too much. You might be thinking, I can't do it. I'm unprepared. Woe is me. I am a man of unclean lips. Maybe we're afraid. Maybe we don't have enough education, enough time, enough money. Maybe we don't have enough other resources. Isaiah didn't think he could do it, but God let him know that he could. Isaiah's response is made into a song too. Here I am, Lord, send me. Simon didn't think he could do it. Jesus said, do not be afraid. From now on, you'll be catching people. A little later, he gave him the nickname that we know Simon by. That's Peter, the Rock. His nickname is Rocky. This morning's reading, it's interesting in a chronological sense. It refers to Simon as Simon Peter at the end, but Jesus didn't give him the name Rocky or Peter until a little later in Luke 6. Regardless of that part, the Bible communicates to us by do not be afraid, and you are called, you are enough. Just tell people your story. Tell people about loving God and loving everyone. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be a preacher whose job it is to do that. You don't have to have all of your story right. You just tell people. Tell people about loving God and loving others. No gimmicks, no tricks, just doing what you do. Jesus asked Peter to put the nets into deeper water. He put the nets into deeper water. We can all respond to a call like that. Coming up during Lent, we're going to be studying a devotional book from the United Church of Christ called Into the Deep. If you don't usually attend Thursday morning Bible study and you have time to do it, or not Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon Bible study, 1 o'clock in the chapel. If you still can't come, starting next week or the week after, we're going to have those books available, Into the Deep. It doesn't mean that the shallows are bad. It means that there is something deeper. And we can respond to a call to move into deeper waters. We can respond to a call to be a vibrant, inclusive Christian community, living out love, respect, and dignity for everyone. And ultimately, all we need to do is to follow that most important command from Jesus. Love one another. In attitude, in practice, with family, with friends, with acquaintances, with people we meet at work, people we meet at the park, people we haven't met, people we may have somehow been taught that they're less than, allies, adversaries, no exceptions. When Jesus says love one another, he's talking to the disciples, but the communication is clear. It isn't love one another if they, if this, if that. It's love one another. When we do that, we're living out the gospel, the good news. No catch. Amen.